Hello, I'm Kyle Jones. Today we are going to be discussing Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. I probably will not get past the first 5 words in Genesis. I probably doubt that we will not get past the first word in Genesis today. But nonetheless, we are here to discuss the meaning of life. What is meaning? What is truth? Why are we here? What is our referent to life? Dr. Ravi Zacharias used a brilliant term called the ontic referent. Ontos in the Greek, or ontic meaning the being, and referent, what do we refer to? The what and the why, if you will. The Greek mind says we are being because why? Because of this or that, the object, which is the referent. So I believe, and I start with I believe, that the Word of God, the Bible, gives us the ontic referent, the meaning, the significance, the signifier to life, where to begin with and where to end. There are many whatnesses, if you will, or many objects out there, such as the study of science, the study of archaeology, which is what we need as theologians, and is what we need as, if you will, in the secular sense, a functioning society. And again, the word secular is the word saeculus in the Latin, or saeculum, meaning the full sack. So we comprise theologians, atheists, agnostic scientists, everybody of all kind. We are of the secular, or the saeculum. So there is no secular society that does not have God in it. So let's begin with what I believe is the beginning of meaning. And that is in book 1, Genesis, chapter 1, verse 1, the first word. I believe this is God-inspired. I believe these words are an expression of God. I believe there is no greater book written than the Bible due to its author. And I do believe that is God, using men as He moved them by His expression, Him being the verb, the men being the dead noun, and God rushing upon them. So let's look at the first word, and I'll say it in English first. Genesis. Okay, now the origin of this word Genesis is in the Greek. And I will get to the root of it is basically this right here, GN. Now, anybody who knows what we've been doing for the past 25 years is the study of Indo-European etymologies, Shemitic or Semitic etymologies, Hamitic, Tokrian, Asiatic etymologies. We are etymologists. We study the root meaning of things as linguists, as scientists, archaeologists, etc. This right here is what we call the zero grade Indo-European etymon. Okay, etymon means the branch, the root, stem, and branches of that word. Genesis means to join. The G to the J is a guttural. The N to the N is what we call a nasal or a liquid. You can look up the word gene or genetics. You'll find the origin of life and the branches of life, the connecting tissues. If you look up the word connecting, connect, you find the same zero grade Indo-European etymon. C and N, there's your gun. Ka is a guttural. Na is a liquid or a nasal. Genetics. We have our guttural and our nasal to join together. Our guttural, our nasal. Ga, na, ka, na. Even taking the word knee. You're joining two parts of the leg together. Right there. You're joining this together. And the last one I would say is the word genius. If you look at the word, and there's a lot more than this, but genius is the antithesis nearly to the word wit. Genius has to do with joining all of the facts, all of the whatnesses of the thing, understanding the why-ness of the thing, if you will, and all of these facts, you line them up and they are collectively in a category of some idea, some thing needing nothing else but itself. And then you align the facts where they need to be, and you traject out of that to a given point for a given answer. That is called genius. And matter of fact, you are not genius. You are in the genius. You are inside the connecting, the gun, the tissues, the stuff of genius. And when we're in it, we're in genius, not genius. Genius means also to originate. And I won't go any further, but you have to understand the magnanimity of this word, Genesis, because in it, it explains the connecting tissues to life itself, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually. There are many other histories, and the Greek word historein, inquiries, askings, if you will, of biological life itself in the physical sense. But that has nothing to do with meaning. It has nothing to do with meaning, even the word meaning, na, the root word Indo-European, it means to put to the mind of, to think it out, to ponder upon. Biology itself doesn't think. It's just a machine that functions very well. There is a man named Joseph Campbell that I quote because he studied quite a bit of mythologies. I don't agree with his outcome necessarily, but I do believe in his studies and what he did. And he was asked a question by Bill Moyers on television, Bill being a former First Baptist minister. He said, well, Joseph, you know so much. You've taught us all these things. Therefore, what is the meaning? What now do we ponder upon? Na, M-N, Indo-European word, Greek word, na, to think upon. What is the meaning of life? What is the meaning of life? And Joseph Campbell took it straight to what Bill said and asked, what is the meaning of bios? And Joseph said, there is no meaning. We're just wandering blobs of protoplasm, bouncing into with energies, giving and exchanging. And Bill said, what are you talking about? You just got through talking for hours in the series about the meaning of life. And Joseph said, there is no meaning of life. But if you want to talk about meaning, we've got to go beyond the biological. So there's something in life that is like the chessboard, the rules, the game board that we play upon. So, with all of that said, we might have a better meaning of the word Genesis now, because it means how did it originate? How did it begin? And let's just say we start here. To originate, and we'll go into quantum physics later, from a singularity we exploded into a quantum flux, hot plasma, and then after, say, 8 to 10 billion years, it starts to cool down and go into spiraling thing, orbits and suns, a solar system, meaning around the suns or the stars, the solus, we begin to spin. So we have this, what we call the cosmos, or the arrangement, beginning, Genesis beginning, or origination. And that might be the best word to start with. Genesis, origination. Is it about life we're discussing, or is it about the mind that we're discussing? Well, it's both. But again, life, the physicality, the whatness is nothing more than the game board, if you will, with the rules. The meaning, the whyness, has to do with the intangible. The heart in terms of the spiritual sense, the mind in terms of the non-tangible phreno or brain sense. The brain is a tangible, the mind is something that can't be touched. Think of an elephant right now flying with pink wings. You can't touch it, but you can see it in the mind. It doesn't exist in the physical world necessarily, unless you want to break it down to waves. But even that, you're not able to define it mathematically. But origination, again, there's your gen, G-N, and horos, ori. Horos means the hour. Horos, if you want to say that. You can say the hour. You can say the horizon. We get our word horizon from that. The point of horizon preceding the physicality at the singularity point with the quantum flux, which is also antiparticles, which is also the blueprint of anything that we would eventually say, do, love, feel. We found that out just recently. Thank you, Dr. Gerald Schroeder, for bringing that up to our attention. A double doctorate MIT graduate, Department of Defense at Israel, quantum physicist. Brilliant man. Love the guy. Brought that up about the quantum flux. This is a blueprint. Keep this in mind for this lecture that had all of our information that would unfurl to the end of this world, this cosmos, this creation at thermal equilibrium or thermodynamics when it all melts down again. And again, we have 1 Corinthians 15:52 to thank us for the elements that will melt with a fervent heat. And that might have been Thessalonians 4, but I'll go back to that in a second. Origination, horos, genetics. We begin here. What is the origin, horos, genesis, of us? And what is the meaning? Okay, enough of the Indo-European stuff. Let's get down to the Hebrew. So, Genesis. Point of origin. Ba. Resh. Eth. This is the word, Genesis. Barashith, in the beginning. This word, ba, for right now I'll give you a simple definition. It means in. This is just your standard modern day Hebrew dictionary that wants to give you the most basic term. Resh means the head or the top. Beginning. What kind of beginning? Intellectual or physical? I believe both. Eth, anything with an eth, an oth, eth, is always a suffix in the plural. Okay? Well, actually, I'm just going to put in the feminines for right now. Feminine. And I don't mean the plural, I meant the singular. My fault. I was saying about something else. In the singular. So feminine, singular. For right now, we'll say it was one act. By the way, eth is singular, feminine. So, in, beginning, feminine. I'm losing my mind. Feminine. We have the word Genesis. Okay, good enough, whatever. You know, it's a construct. They call it a construct. It's just simply two words with a suffix. Good enough, right? No. Moses ben Maimonides, a 13th century scholar, discussed about the meaning, the Hebrew scholar, he discussed the meaning of words in the Hebrew as how they unfurl, how they unfold as a flower. If you continue to unfold them, you find more and more beauty in them. Until you've come to a point where you're enwrapped in it. Okay, ba, ra, sheath. Now, what you'd say is resh, ba, resh, eth, if you want to get the construct of the word. Okay, ba, we always write, and it's really just kind of like a shva, ba. Some people say ba, but ba, depending upon how you're going to say it in terms of inflection. Ba, resh, or rosh. Again, how are you going to use the word? This is just the nominative singular. I'm just trying to just give you the root of it. And eth, we don't need to look at the word eth right now. It's really just eth. Ba, in, resh, the top or the head. Prior to this given script, kind of almost a square cuneiform styled writing that was given to us by the scribes in Babylon as they were taken into captivity, or the Judaites were taken into captivity in 586 as their last deportation into Babylon. They were scholarly men who learned to use the mind of the Babylonians and the Persians to create an academe that used vowel points, letters, marks that make sounds, e's. The ancient Hebrews didn't use that. And that's why that I almost, in some ways, consider it secondary to say ba or be or et or e. It just simply was a kind of a shva sound. Barashith. You say like that. You just run over it. But what they did give us was kind of a capture of a time capsule of how they used to speak in the ancient world. So we do thank them for that they did capture somewhat of how the patriarchs of old, prior to the captivity in Babylon, did speak. So they did try to capture that sonic nature, the phoneme nature of how the patriarchs used to speak. But that was just simply culturally given, if you will. Now, I'm going to erase this. I'm going to go back to the same word. I'm going to show how the word itself commits itself linguistically, historically, and archaeologically. Okay? Ba. That's the B sound. That's a schwa sound. Ba. It's really ba. But ba, if you just say it out loud, because ba is the phoneme, and bait is the picture of that letter that we'll get to in a second. Archaeologically, we found that it's another word, it's another letter altogether. It's another picture of the letter altogether. Ba, to Nachmanides, Onkelos, Rashi, Ramban, Moses ben Maimonides, the greatest Hebrew scholars of all time, in terms of the Torah, studying the texts of the Hebrew language, said, when you see this letter, the heading of a chapter or a book, it means this. From this we go forth in the containment of the story. It's like a hand directing us going that way. They could have used other terms, other prepositions, or not used any preposition at all. But they're using this letter for a particular preposition for a particular point. From here, we have our intellectual history. And from here, though it be intellectual, we can also hint to the origins biologically, how God made us. There's another letter. We go prior to the days of Babylon. It's called it's a pictogram. It's actually a picture. A picture that letter right there would have been somewhat what Moses would have read. Something what he would have seen. And something what Abraham would have seen. It's a basic letter, bait. You can say house now, but what it meant in the original state was this. It meant the blueprints. The blueprint, and it actually said the tent floor plans. Sometimes I'm writing out in English and I start writing crazy stuff, just know I'm thinking about something else. So catch me if I'm writing, I don't know, cookies and cream, and I should be writing something like Genesis here. That picture goes back at least 1500 to 1800 BC, which I believe it goes back further than that. But we're talking, this right here is no later probably than, say, 500 BC. That's not that old. That picture on the bottom goes back, I personally believe, somewhat the origin goes back to Sumeria. So we have the first letter, blueprint, okay? Now, Ba, to the scribes and to the scholars of the Hebrew text, say that it means the intellectual beginning. Right here. From here, we go forward to understand the why-ness of everything. Not necessarily the what-ness. The what-ness is the game board. The why-ness of everything, we start here. Okay? So if we can understand the first part of this construct, Bereshith, means from the beginning, right here, we begin our intellectual inquiry. It is also the blueprint, the house floor plans in the pictogram. So we're given, if we search deep enough and go back far enough, the meaning of that and the meaning of that. So we're looking at two different dimensions right now. Let's see if God has control over time and space. In semiotics, semiotics is the study of word meaning and how everything is put together in a culture. But in God's culture, you got to look at the entire creation in terms of like a hologram and then look through it and see it. So watch this one. So we have a construct in the mind. From here we begin our intellectual inquiry. And here it means also the blueprints, the floor plans. It means it has not physically come to pass yet. The idea that we'll have a consequence. Con, joining, there's your genius. Sequence, like we'd say sequitur. If you're in court, sir, that's a non sequitur statement. I'll render you moot if you say it again, because it has no reference to root, stem, and branches of our conversation or argument here. So this is a sequitur. It is an idea that will have a consequence, and the consequences are sequitorial. So, Rosh. Now watch this one. This is going to be really cool. And the word is just said resh. Resh. Okay. Let's pay close attention. Resh. Let me go ahead and put, the first was ba, shva, be. I'm just going to put resh. Just know the vowels are so secondary. If you looked in the dictionary, just say rosh, doesn't matter. Resh. The pictogram, 1800 BC probably, I'm going to do a poor job of this one, was a picture of a man's head. Resh, rosh. It meant the top of the person's body. It meant the head or the beginning. Okay? From here we have the blueprints. It's a constructive word. We go forth from the very top of it all, intellectually and physically. So, if you will, the Shakespearean stage, the dramatic stage, where all the persona are here in the significant fashion, signifying meaning at this stage. Dr. David Roll, I call him doctor, I think he's got a double master's, Trinity College, Oxford. Good friend of mine, did work with him in some documentaries. He's done a tremendous work on the discovery of Eden. I believe he's found it. They found the names, the surrounding names, areas by the Badu, the people that live in that area. You should get the DVD. It's pretty expensive. It's on the Discovery Channel. He's written many books on the origins of the Bible. He maintains being an agnostic for various reasons, and I understand. But to say the least, we can say that David Roll is the archaeologist who studied under the great Manfred Bitek, an Egyptologist, archaeologist, and they discovered Eden. Okay, so in the discovery of Eden, they found that Eden was in an area a little bit south of Tabriz, Iran. Now, I could get a map out, but I don't have one. But let's just say, roughly, here's Iran. Here's Azerbaijan up here. I'm not going to, Azerbaijan. Here's Iraq. A lot of flux from this area came into that, but your Tabriz is up here. Actually, the whole thing is Iran. This is Iraq down here. Azerbaijan, I would now take it over here. Azerbaijan, which you have a lot of problems with Unocal, oil lines going into China. Black and Caspian Sea. Well, the Black and Caspian Sea is over here and over here, surrounding it. And up here is Russia. It goes into Georgia, Russia, Georgia, Russia, or Russia. Let's just put it this way. If you can see that all right. Russia, Georgia, that southern Russia in that area. Coming down here through the Black and Caspian Sea, going straight into the Middle East. Ezekiel 38 refers to Gog, the force, the man, the personified movement of Satan put into a collective nation will attack Israel as they are brought back by the sword, which is 1948. Thank you, God. Thank you, Ben Yehuda. And will attack them with Persia or Iran in the last day. Aligned with them will be China, I believe, Libya, etc. But they will be the ones leading it up. It'll be Russia. Ezekiel 38 says that the sons of Gog, or should I put Gog is the chief prince, and they are his sons. If you look at the federal aspect of the cities, or the sons of the father, were Meshech and Tubal in Ezekiel 38. Meshech is exactly the city where is the same place, location that Moscow is. Meshech is Mushk, Moscow. And Tubal in Ezekiel is exactly in the same place that Tobolsk is, Russia. So we have a fix etymologically, archaeologically, city-state, right there in Russia. In the days of Ezekiel, of that prophecy, it was not called the USSR, nor was Russia some simple borderline area with Georgia here and Azerbaijan and Iran. Russia was just a region, that had a chief. His name was Gog, or the Gogites, where you get the word Gogol. It has kind of a interesting Gollum-esque name, Gog. But if you get down to it, Koko. There's your Indo-European root. They were on the Caucasus Mountains, I believe that's it, Caucasus Mountains. That's where you get the word Caucasian. They were the Kurgans. They were the warriors. They were this white-bread, warring, killing, brutal race. So definitely these were the, if you will, the Japhetic peoples. Now, Japheth himself, I believe, came way later, of course, because I believe the flood itself, the account was later. I will discuss what the flood is. I believe that there were several local floods. I will discuss what the world meant in that term errata in the Sumerian, and also eratz, same word in the Hebrew. It means a local landmass, a stage of significance. And that entire stage of significance of God's relationship to man was wiped out to be restarted. That's the great flood. That's the great Noachian flood. Did Noah exist? Absolutely. Was there a flood? Absolutely. Was there a boat? Absolutely. Was that story true? Absolutely. But we got to understand that the words have to semiotically commit to the archaeology and the history and to the text itself and the meaning of it all put together. We have to think through things from a hologram of genius to get to the meaning of what God is saying. So, Ba-Resh, well, Eth, the feminine aspect, just means it was created. Barash is what I want to focus on. In the beginning, the blueprints before it happened, and then, boom, it happened. Well, between here and here, could have been 10 billion years. God's time is not our time. And matter of fact, science today says that if you look forward in time, it would be just like steps. It might take you one minute, but to the people looking from the receiving end of it might have taken millions of years. And there's actually an equation for that we'll discuss later. 1,000,000,000 times 1. So, from God's perspective, 1,000,000,000 years could be 1 day. 1,000,000,000 years could be a half a day or 3 hours. Because time did not solidify itself. Hot helium, hydrogen gases being cooled down, they weren't stable. They were elastic. Time, E equals mc squared, Einstein's most famous equation, said that as stability sets, as we have stable ground and stable energy and stable light, stable time, we have it all together. We can have E equals mc squared. Whenever one of them is not stable, the others are not stable. So there's nothing stable until all things cool down. So time is irrelevant. It's just, or you could say it's relevant to God's word. But Rosh, the head, the beginning of the stage of significance, Dr. David Roll established right here. Kind of a 4-tiered area divided by rivers. They have a fix on the rivers of the Pishon, Gihon, Tigris, and Euphrates. We have a fix on the archaic names found still in this region. This Aden is what the Persians still call it. It was mentioned in the text of En-Merkur, the history of the Sumerian kings, one of our oldest received texts in the world. En-Merkur, En means sky, heaven, Mer means water, Kur means Lord. That was Nimrod. They were the stories of Nimrod. You should study it. The text of Sumeria, the account of En-Merkur and his Amanuan, or his secretary, as he sent his secretary back into Eden from Babylon to gather precious jewels that he knew about that were still in Eden. How about that? So he knew where it was, and David Rohl used the very text of Nimrod to go find Eden in his own map that Nimrod wrote to his secretary to go run now, get my jewels for me. Eden was in the steppes of Russia. It was in Rosh. In Rosh, we begin our intellectual history. Aden, Mount Sahand was the great mountain that I believe, along with David Rohl, this mountain right here was where God's mountain was. And in it, there was supposedly an abyss, a water flow, a current that somehow or another was connected to the four rivers within this garden. And of course, I can go into the text, the mythological text of the Babylonians and Sumerians, and say that this God went into the Abzu, or the abyss. Abzu, to go into the currents itself, underwater, and come back out. And it was that mountain that we see in some kind of idea that's misty, something that's not quite clear, but clear at the same time, as how that God had his right-hand man Satan on top of that mountain, and that he was cast off the mountain. Somehow that he had dominance over Aden. There's an old Bedouin story, pre-Islamic. It talks about this god on his great mountain, who his best friend was named Iblis, which they now call Satan. And God told Iblis, I want you to go down to the people in Aden and deal with them and comfort them and instruct them that things are okay, and to guide them and to rally them and to bring them my word. And it was a test, if you will. This is an old Bedouin story, but I think it has a lot of meaning, a hint to it, if you will. And Iblis said, I do not want to leave your side. I love you so much. And God cast him out, or off the mountain, and to dwell inside of that garden as a servant. And it was the story of the serpent that was so angry at what happened from the God who cast him off that he deceived the man and the woman. Now that's an old story. It's an old Bedouin story, but it predates Islam. And I think it's interesting that a lot of the Bedou have no investiture in lying to you. They're just simply tent-dwelling nomads. They want to pass on a history, a good story. So a collective nature is what I'm trying to bring to the table, stories upon stories that kind of give it an idea, some kind of buoyancy. But in this area of Rosh was called Arata. Arata. We're still in Rosh. Eden or Aden was a beautiful garden. The Hebrew text calls it the Gamda Eden. Gamda means the conjoined, confined garden of Aden. So even in Aden, it was the most glorious garden. And if you look at the surrounding mountains around Aden, you'll see that it was enclosed, it was encapsulated in mountains, and there was lush life and water streams and a fructivity of nature itself, a buoyant place, and the atmosphere was somehow very clean and purified. I did a long, lengthy study on the 7 main mountains, if you will, that covered Aden, that as the sky would come, night sky would come above, it would come over and go down. It would set in the west, rise in the east. The night sky, it was a story in the stars. And the people who occupied Gamda Eden were the first tellers of the stories of the chariot, the war chariot that would come over the first time, the great warrior to attack and stomp and crush the head of the snake or the hydra, and the second time to come back as reigning king, as a lion. And you have these old tales amongst the 7 hills, the mountains of God, and a great battle scene coming over and over, like a record player playing over and over. And they would see it night after night, this tale, the story. And it was the hope of the Messiah. So when you read Sumerian history or poetry, you always hear about numbers of 7 and all of this motion of war and the battles in heaven of this great hero or epic Messiah to come twice. So these beautiful tales concerning these people that had told them in the Aden range. But Arata was the landmass within the Rosh that we get the word earth from. And I make the vowels very secondary, but if you can see, Rada, Eretz, earth. Eretz is the Hebrew word for earth. Arata was a Sumerian word for earth. Earth is the American word for earth, and Arda was the Anglo-Saxon word for earth. Even J.R. Tolkien used the word Midgard, meaning like the Middle Earth. He played off of the Anglo-Saxon and all the other Indo-European words, but interesting enough, we have it in Sumerian, we have it in Hebrew. It's a very old term. So the whole earth was right here, Arata, and in the middle, the heart of it was Aden. This was the stage of significance. Now, back to this Iblis story, I believe that the Satan did come from another area and work his way in. And the Bible says that he came from outside of the garden and came in. There is a group of people, I want to say about 5 miles south of Aden. They used to call themselves the Korabai. I've heard the word caribou too. You can call them the Caribs, Korabai. I'll say that for right now. There's a history that shows that these people, 5 miles south of Eden, are now called what they call the Yazidi clan, which means the Satan worshippers. The Satan worshippers didn't worship Satan like you'd see Anton LaVey, who is a complete, I won't go into it, he has no idea what Satanism is. I could surely teach him what true Satanism is. It's not what he's doing. He's got a hackneyed form of medievalism in the wrong sense. But the Satan or Shatan, the scandalizer is what the Hebrew word would use, the tripper, the confuser, the shut in the Persian, the modern day Persian, or even say 1,000-year-old Persian. But the Shatan, where the Yazidi clan is what they're called in a derogative sense, I believe. They worshipped this Shatan because they believed he was the highest of angels with the best of heart. Now that does go back to the story of Iblis, who loved God with all of his heart, and he was cursed away from God. So there's a history there on that level. But what's further, you ever heard of the word cherub before? Can you see it in here? Cherub. God did have an angel and several angels in the Garden of Eden. The place is a garden around the tree of life and tree of knowledge later, but the tree of life. Satan was a high angel, but whatever it's worth, I'm just trying to create a composite sketch of what's going on here. But there was about 5 miles south of Aden, a group of people called the Korabai, or the caribou. And you've heard the word cherub, so we'll go to that later. There's more to it than that, but there's got to be a bigger picture here. But we do have a linguistic play. We have an archaeological play with this region. We've got a biblical play with this region. We're getting a composite sketch. Now, last thing, what happened whenever Cain was banned? He killed his brother. Where did he go? He went to the land of Nod, right? Well, if you go about, I want to say it's about 50 miles, 50 to 100 miles east of Aden, there is a land, or two sections, called Upper and Lower Nocti. I wonder if you could use Grimm's Law or etymology for a second, you might be able to make out one of that word. Lower Nocti. What do you think that might be? Cain went into the land of Nod. Remember that? The biblical name for Nod? There it is right there. on your map. Upper and Lower Naqti. You can even look today. Upper, Lower Naqti. So Cain was banned to this region. It's like kind of upper Afghanistan. And the sons of Cain, the Kanu clan, the forgers of metal, brass, all musical instruments, the Genghis Khan clan. Like I told you before, this was the region, I believe, that was destroyed in water. The stage of significance during the days of Noah. And it was a massive flood. Don't get me wrong. It was a massive flood that wiped out everybody. And in that day, I studied Asiatic, semiotics, languages, etymologies. I had a AP class I took with Dr. David Lawrence at David Lipscomb University. That was one of my favorite classes on Asiatic history. And we went into the Shah dynasty around 2200 BC. There were mentionings of Emperor Shen, who was the originator of the Shah dynasty, probably 2250 BC, in which we are saying that's kind of roughly when the flood happened, right? There's a reason why people are starting to go out anyway, but we'll discuss that later. There was a culture hero named Yu. His name was Yu. And it was one of 7 culture heroes that I studied. Now, this is not some crazy Zacharias Sitchin idea. This has to do with history. Why? I don't even know where to put his name. Yu. That's what the Chinese called him anyway. And I have a feeling it has to do with the play on God's name. Elia or Au, something to do with the sons of God. But whatever this guy was, he's in history. He was a culture hero that went from this region to China to warn them of a flood and that they need to prepare for it. And that's in Chinese history. And we have a tremendous study you can look up for yourself. Culture heroes all around the world, but in the Chinese culture, Yu. Taught by a brilliant man, Dr. David Lawrence. He's a dear friend of mine. We always have a love-hate relationship. We challenge each other to things, and sometimes we don't hang out as much as we should, but I love the man, and he introduced me to this study of Asiatic history. So, Upper, Lower Naqti, land of Nod. Aden, the garden. Arata, the landmass, earth. In the beginning, Resh. This is subject to the land of Russia. Who were they? The Gogol people, the Gogite people, the Caucasus people. Who were their sons? Who was his sons or the ones he led over? Meshech and Tubal, Ezekiel 38. Moscow and Tobolsk. Same region, same landmass. I'm going to blow your mind. One last thing. Dr. Anna Mensch, I believe it was. I'll get this name for you. She's a Russian scholar. At the same time, roughly, that Dr. David Rohl was in there, they were not working together. She has no biblical, intention. There's nothing intent. She's a scientist, a linguist. She came in here, this region, found a reconstructive language called Kartvelian language, which is akin to Sumerian, but it predates it. Okay, it's a Proto-Sumerian language. She has done several tremendous works on the correlation between Sumerian and Kartvelian language. I want to say that I'm working on a theme too, a thesis, that this region north of Arata, coming down into Arata, going out from Arata, coming all to the ways of the shores of Finland, way over here, Baltic cultures, all the way into Asia, which of course we have the culture hero Yu being found talking to Emperor Shin archaeologically. We have texts of that. We have the tortoise writings, the tortoise shell writings. They'd score the writings into it for their histories, all the way to ancient Japan. The Ainu, I believe they're called, and I think as Tolkien played on the Ainu, or the early heavenly bodies, peoples. This bend was a hypothetical bend called the Volga Bend, Volga. Let me write this down. It's getting crazy now, but the Volga Bend, and it was a trade route that reached all the way from Finland to Japan. At least that's what we found in the language carrying over the trade route, the earliest of trade routes. And in this region and in this language, we have the Siberian plains. We have an early language that Dr. Anna I want to say it's mentioned. I could be Minsky. I could be wrong. Forgive me, Dr. Anna. I'll find your name and give it next time. But she found that she reconstructed through Magdalene Svan languages a language called Kartvelian that is Proto-Sumerian. I have a treatment. Stay right there. I'm not leaving. I'm going to grab it over here. We're very loose around this recording. I'm not trying to be too fancy. Called the Finnish noun. You could look it up for yourself. Just type in http www.ling.helsinki.fi for Finland. And we have word forms of the Finnish noun, kalpa, meaning shop, that you can inflect 2,253 different ways. Now, this is saying one word. I probably got about 75 pieces of paper here. It keeps on going. It tells you the different prepositional stances you can take on one word, or the inflectional way. How can you have ultra-ingressive, regressive? How can you approach one word 2,253 different ways? These people, the Finnish people, have a history, and Finnish language has an undefined history, exactly where it came from. They can't find the parent to it. Now, I think that Dr. Anna Marsh or Mensch is doing that right now. But my theory is that same culture that could speak or inflect a noun over 2,000 different ways must have been some kind of culture that was imbued with the intelligence of a God that breathed his tselem, or his image, or his essence into Adam and Eve. And again, we're reconstructing through a hologram of events that happened around the same time. And the archaeology, the language, we're trying to depict what happened. We'll use good myth. We'll use good mythology. We'll use good everything to reconstruct. But we do have a Volga Bend. We do have a trade route, and it did touch or join together with these southern steppe cultured peoples. Iran, or old Iran, it wasn't called then. It was just simply Persia. It was simply nothing. It was the steppe plains of Shinar. I think these are the same people. I think that Adam and Eve, whatever they spoke, they were given a tremendous vocabulary, a tremendous mind to have Congress communicate with this living, breathing God. Now, for right now, I want to stop here because I think it's good enough. We covered one word. Ba, the ancient pictogram, means the blueprint. We can track it back to here and also say that it later became a generic term for the word housing, bait. We can also say intellectually, if you read it from the cuneiform script, or the Cunis script, the square wedge-shaped script from out of Babylon that the scribes concocted or made. We can say it means from here we have intellectual beginning. From here we can say we have true historical, archaeological beginning and intellectual beginning. Rosh, Oresh, the pictogram of the head from the top. From the intellectual beginning we begin, we go down. We believe it has fixed with Russia, the plains of Russia, before it was called Russia. And the word commits to the archaeology. The word commits to the story of Genesis. It commits to itself as a word, and the phonemes themselves commit to the stories of the pictograms, and the pictograms commit to the phonemes, and the word commits to the pictograms, and the word and the pictograms and the phonemes commit to the entire story. Nobody has written a story such like that ever. All right, I'm Kyle Jones. Thank you.